Mm-hmm.
Same thing with even trying to hire a consultant.
That's the hard part. That's the hard part.
It's trying to get paid.
Oh, it's right out and right behind here, right behind here. Yep. Oh, they're good. I just need, there's no presentation. No, there's no presentations. So I'm just gonna ask panelists to start,
I'm gonna sit on the end since I got.
that's fine. You can sit on the end.
I have a minor role, just remember.
Oh, that means you get all the hard questions.
No, it doesn't.
Batista, can you sit? I'm just gonna have the utilities sit here, and then we'll have the consultants, and then we'll have Steve. I guess not. I'm wrong. You can sit wherever you would like. Hey, Honest, do you mind? I'm gonna have the utilities go first and then go to the consultants, okay? Don't worry, it's PVC at the end. That's right, keep going. Okay, we're gonna push the consultants down to the end there. That's it. I know who's the most important in this room. I'm gonna hand this to you. I'm gonna hand this one down. It's here,
Consultants, microphone.
something like that. No, it's yours.
Yeah.
Questions? WSSC water.
We'll give everybody a few more minutes to come in. See if we can round some folks up. Yeah, let's go do it. Hey.
Thank you.
Nice. Pradeep. Nice to meet you.
Your name is?
Pradeep.
Pretty, of course.
What?
I just don't. I just want. All have accent. In one way or another.
Oh, that's good. Okay, that's good. Because that's something we've been looking at doing. We're working with a consultant right now, but it's nice to see what else is out there.
Getting started.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
yours.
because that's what I was looking for. Because like right now with ours, it's kind of
It's all about that infrastructure. That's
where you
That's
guys
why
have
we're
your cleaners like on
everybody's
different schedules and stuff too.
That's what it-
So
yeah. Everybody's
like with the cleaners and like schedules, sometimes they feel like, oh, I want to see it.
Well, and that's
Back there,
the,
again,
the,
back there, again. I don't like that.
the analogy that I say. when I
Yeah,
say that.
so they like for it to be
We
like
have
a
a safety
lot
division, right?
more.
But
Well, I should like, I mean,
Oh, everybody working, everyone's a safety man.
yeah.
Which is
So,
true.
like,
I tell my folks working
all
over
like
there,
three months.
but if you are the last line of defense to check these, I said, hell no. I'm the last.
And so
line.
you're also have
Everybody has roles and responsibilities and maintaining it. As much as I do, you got probably 10 times more job to do.
And those are on all the mails.
So that is the consultant, Mike.
And how many big judges do we have?
That's right.
May I go ahead?
Oh, that's okay. Because we're like one
Can we
person
start?
now, 3,000 miles. Turnabout.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let me try that again. I know we just had our sandwiches. Good afternoon, everyone. Good. Yeah. Hello, hello. Thank you. We're getting ready to start our second discussion panel for the day. And that was, first of all, I just want to say the first panel that came up earlier did a fantastic job. And so another quick round of applause to all of our panelists. It was excellent. Hugh, you're going to be a very hard act to follow. But I'm going to do my best, and I know our panelists here are going to just rock it to the docket today. Okay. So we talked and we started off with the clean water, right? Okay. Now we're going to the dirty water. Okay. We're going deeper too, in many cases, much deeper. Okay, with our pipes and everything. And before we get started, I'm just going to introduce myself real quick. For those who don't know me, my name is Gage Muckleroy. I'm with GHD Engineering and Consulting, and I've been with GHD for going on 29 years now. So it's been a long time, and I've worn many hats while at GHD, including at one point or another as the water market leader in asset management. Today, though, I get to do fun stuff. I get to work with clients and try to solve real problems. And so let's kind of get started here. I'd like our panelists, please introduce yourself and maybe tell us a little bit about what your role is, either at your utility or on the private side within your company.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Monet Lee. I am the acting division manager for Pipeline Infrastructure Strategic Planning, which is with WSSC Water. What we do is basically we're managing the linear assets, and we're looking at both the water and wastewater side of things, setting strategic priorities and planning work and prioritizing projects.
I'm Pratishtha Pradhan. I talked this morning about myself. I'm working as a supervising engineer with Houston Water Planning's infrastructure planning team. And right now I'm working as a acting DAD for the infrastructure and development services within Houston Water for a few months.
Good afternoon, Anas Malkawi. I'm with HRSD, Hampton North Sanitation District, and my job there is to make sure we're investing in the right infrastructure at the right time.
Hi, I'm Pradeep Nagarajan. I'm out of Atlanta office with GHD, and I am actually here on behalf of Walter, but I actually work on the master planning and the modeling for GHD for the Southeast region.
Hello, everybody. My name is Chris Dermody. I'm a digital solutions consultant with Jacobs. I've been with the organization now for 3 years. Prior to that, I retired from Denver Water after 20 years as their chief information officer, chief geek and cheerleader in charge of IT and OT. And now at Jacobs, I provide clients with strategy and thought process to enable digital transformation.
Steve Cooper, Unibel PVC Pipe Association. I've been with the association for about 16 years. Prior to that, I worked at the Louisville Water Company, University of Louisville grad. UK is a great program too. Worked in consulting for a short period after that. I'm the regional engineer for the PVC Pipe Association, representing that product in 4 through 60 inch sizes for the US and Canada for water, sewer, and force main reclaim applications.
Great. So I'd like to get started in our conversation today in a couple of ways. And I'm really going to be building on some of the stuff that we were talking about in the initial panel. There's a lot of overlap, but at the same time, I think it's going to be really important to get the wastewater perspective, as we're going through. So I'm going to want to have somewhat of a strategic conversation, but before we go strategic, I'd like to start tactical. And one of my initial kind of questions really is, when we think of water, like we were talking about earlier, we're predominantly talking pressure all the way. Pressure systems that we're working with, or we're dealing with, we're thinking about them in that perspective. But when it comes to our wastewater assets, we have collection systems and we have force mains. So we have to work in both worlds. And so I'd kind of like to hear a little bit from both the utilities and on the private side. Like, what are some of those main differences that you have to deal with in your asset management programs? And so what are those challenges? And then what are some of the things that you're doing or you're putting into place to address those challenges? Monet, can you start?
So we have a little over 100 miles of pressure sewer, and it's some of the same challenges you experience with water, right? You don't have as much technology out there to get the inspections that you need in order to make decisions. So that's kind of where we're struggling. We use a lot of the similar technologies that are used on water to try to find ways in which we can get more information on our sewer, our force main specifically, to just make decisions. Like, how can we make a decision on whether or not it needs to be replaced without knowing what type of condition it's in, what's going on in its environment? And so every time we get a chance, we're trying to find new and different ways to use that technology to make more decisions.
So in case of City of Houston, we have a lot of force main, a lot of lift station force main as well, and a whole lot of gravity pipes. There's a basic difference in the method of condition assessment, right? So as she already mentioned that there is some challenges on which method to use for force main. We tried like pure technology, the smart ball methodology one time with the CIP project implementation, and it could do in one project, it couldn't do in the other. So there is some different, so we have a strategy to replace those force main if it is 40-year-old. Then also we get a challenge, if it is too long, then it costs millions of dollars. Do you want to do that every 40 years? Then the answer is no, we want to do something for the longer ones. So we are dividing those into shorter and longer force main and using those kind of technology. Whereas in the gravity side, we're doing CCTV, which is the main methodology that we are using for inspection right now. And we're also doing the prediction kind of AI implementation to see what we can do to find the condition of those which we cannot get to that CCTV right now. So we have like a year's plan to get there for the full cycle. But until that, we have to do something. When you make a decision right now for the project, you cannot just go and do the ones that has been identified. We have to do those identified, but then if there is something that could be more critical, we need to at least do assessment of those. So that's why in order to do those assessment priority, also we need to have some kind of prediction. And then if it says, okay, this is a high priority risk area, then go there and do that inspection before others.
Okay.
Just like the previous, they said similar challenges. The gravity side is pretty easy for us. It's only 10% of our system, but CCTV has a pretty standard format of how you collect the data, and it's kind of a find and fix program. You send a CCTV truck out there and they'll find defects and you'll prioritize the replacement of that. On the force main side, it's obviously much more challenging for us, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, that it's a very manifolded system with many connections, and we have a kind of an unwritten rule where if the condition assessment cost is going to cost more than 25 or 30% of the replacement cost, and we might as well just go ahead and replace it, because 50% of the time when you do condition assessment, the result is going to be, yes, go ahead and replace it. So why, take the cost of the condition assessment and the replacement cost? So we've used almost every technology that there is, from Pure, from Ecologics, from Hydromax, from all the different vendors out there, some with success, some with great success, some with failure, some with great failure. And we learn from those. And the way we feel about it is we're not ashamed to fail in those technologies because we like to, and I had a conversation with a few during lunch is, as a progressive organization, we like to benefit the industry. Even if it doesn't benefit us, it benefits the industry, whether it's other utilities or whether it's actual the technology provider themselves. That way they can enhance their technology. They see from those failures, they learn from those failures, they enhance those technologies. And innovation in technology is only driven by the need of the organization. So if there are organizations out there that are, using these technologies, then that would drive the industry to improve on that technology.
I think they have answered pretty much everything. I don't know what else to add from the private sector. I think one of the important things that's coming from the private world is to sort of cater the needs of the utilities that we are working with. So, for example, on the Miami-Dade, which actually has over 1,000 stations with several thousand miles of force mains, it has its own definite program for force mains separately than the gravity mains that comes into play. And the growth, the climate change, the hydrology aspect of it affects more on their gravity system. So they had a different perspective on their gravity mains, taking all those into consideration, which doesn't affect their force mains to that much. But a lot of times we take the pipes, gravity and force main separately and forget the station that's there in the middle. So they actually created one of the first utilities across the nation to start a pump station PSIP program that actually benefited in terms of saving a lot of these force mains, thinking that force main was the issue, but actually sometimes the flow coming into the pump stations, how they operated during the wet weather conditions. So from an asset management perspective, it's not just the assets, the maintenance of the
Right.
assets, it's also the operation of it that comes into the play. Just wanted to add that.
Great.
Thank you.
Did a great job describing the differences between the forced environment and the gravity-fed environment. At Jacobs, we're really focused right now on developing technologies and services for our clients, particularly in the collection system realm with gravity-fed pipes, using tools like artificial intelligence and machine learning. We'll perhaps talk about more on that later. But the challenges are big. The scope is huge. The country's need, it's multi-billion dollars in backlog with the outstanding inspections and condition assessments and remediation plans. And we're hoping to help our clients, start to get ahead of that.
I think as an association, our main objectives is to help utilities understand the proper installation and design of the materials. And then we also represent the existing users of the product, just to kind of give you a feel for how big this industry is. There's over 1 million miles of PVC pipe in service today, over 60,000 miles of PVC force main in service today. This is a product that's been around for about 60 years now. We look at things like what longevity and research along those kind of things. So that's what we're here to do, is to support the existing users, at the same time get that information out to other users.
Great. And Chris, I was waiting to see how long it was going to take before somebody said AI and ML in their answers. Okay.
Count on me.
So, okay, good. All right. I figured as much. No. That's good. And so why don't we kind of like use that as a dovetail segue into maybe the follow-up is, you talked about some of the different challenges between pressure versus gravity, in the technologies and so forth, but you've also then got different types of data coming in, right? So you're going to have different types of data that we're going to have to infer from and try to translate that to this thing. What do we call it? Remaining useful life, right? Or what is it that we're going to be looking to use that data for to be able to do that? And in some cases, there's fairly well established standards out there. You talk about gravity pipe. We all know, for the most part, NASCO, defect coding, and so forth. They've developed that for other appurtenances and other types of pipelines that are associated with gravity sewers. But still, at the end of the day, we get a defect rating or a code about a crack or a misaligned joint or an O&M issue. And so what are some things that we could all be thinking about doing, or what are you doing as examples? Maybe I should ask both, again, private and public, on taking that data and then translating it into something you and your staff can actually use okay, to actually make decisions. And so I'd like to hear a couple of examples. And anywhere we got AI and machine learning actually doing it also, you get a extra credit kind of an aspect. So anybody who wants to start on that one, maybe, Honest, you got the mic.
Sure. On the gravity side, we are using AI and machine learning.
There you go, check, all right.
But not ourselves. So we don't do our own CCTV and HRSD. It's we don't have as much gravity pipe to actually justify the staff to do it ourselves. But we've seen the growth in the technology that we said, we can put it in our requirements or we should leave it out of the requirements that it needs to be someone to actually code the defects. We can just leave it generic and say, as long as we get a NASCO compliance, database that has the defect codes, however it was coded, we're okay with it. We've seen the technology, we trust it now. I would say just as much as we trust the human data collection, because there's also human error sometimes in the coding itself. So we were open to that. We're open with Sewer AI and some of the other platforms that do the automated auto coding, but we don't do it ourselves. On the force main side, we are relying heavily on the desktop analysis. So a lot of the likelihood and consequences based on proximity to corrosive soils, to historical failures based on different type of materials, and based on historic condition assessments. And so we rely heavily on the desktop analysis. So that's where we're getting the data from. A lot of geospatial stuff, obviously. And then from that's when we target specific areas that we say, where we're suspecting there could be something here based on the desktop analysis. Now let's dig down and figure out what's going on there, or insert some technology to calibrate our assumption of the desktop analysis, and then calibrate the model. If it said there was high risk based on a desktop analysis, we'll do a condition assessment. And then if it's actually looking pretty good, we'll modify it down. If it's just as bad as we thought it was, then we'll just keep it at high risk and budget for the replacement.
Okay.
Gage, I like
Anybody
the-
else?
I like the way you teed up the question or the topic. What do you do with this defect analysis? You know, it's in a standard NASCO database format. What do you do with it? How does your staff take this and make some meaningful and smart R&R plans? I'd like to comment on that,
Sure.
because my exposure to NASCO, I'm fairly new to the field, was, so what? What does this thing really tell you? You got a bunch of defects, a bunch of grade levels, but that really doesn't tell you the condition of a pipe segment. You could have a pipe segment with a total condition score, a total grade score, of 16, and another one with 10. But the one with 10 is in much worse shape than the one with 16, because it's a sum of grades, the sum of grades by pipe. Not the best way to do it. So what we have done is we've developed a tool to do condition assessment using engineering logic. Take that NASCO PUCP database and convert it into insights, not data, but insights that tell you what should be done, what order it should be done in, when it should be done, and even budgetary numbers as to what it's going to cost to really help drive an effective rehabilitation plan. I think the NASCO database is, well, swell, it's great, but it doesn't get you to where you need to be. It doesn't get our clients to where they ultimately need to be.
Okay. Batista or Monet,
I
anything
think I
that you?
presented this morning, so I talked about most of them already.
Okay.
So we're doing CCTV for our gravity at WSSC Water, and one of the biggest things that we're doing, we do a lot of CCTV. So we're taking that data. We have a group of reviewers, and they're reviewing these and setting priorities based off of the type of defects, and also making a recommendation on what type of rehab is needed for those pipes. That information is then put into a dashboard where further analytics are going into it. So you're looking at how long the asset's been, had a recommendation on it, what type of L2 score was given, so the PAPC score that you got from that asset. You're also looking at what defects, what type of defects are occurring. So the PACP is giving you different types of defects. You're taking those type of defects to get an idea of what type of infiltration is coming in the pipe, because that's a big area that we're trying to look at, infiltration and addressing that within our system. So we're taking all of those and then taking those assets and prioritizing them for our design group so they can start seeing certain areas that they need to work in. So we're set up by, we have 29 basins. So they do their work based off of basins and neighborhoods. So we're creating prioritizations based off of each of those basins and the assets within them, where they're ranking and how they are. So that's our goal, is to kind of just address these assets, take that data that we're getting and not just pretending as though it doesn't matter, taking that and making some decisions off of that data. So that's really important for us. We want to keep developing that and taking a lot of the other things that we're doing. So how often are we doing our cleaning? How often are we doing CRC? Taking all the different things that we're doing, putting that into an overall ranking system. And then that is helping us to prioritize and take our assets to the next level. We're hoping that we can continue to build upon that.
Okay, that's great. And so now I want to kind of look to the audience, and because I've got a lot of questions, but I'd like to hear something maybe from the audience. If you have anything that's on, please.
I have a question for Pradeep. So you mentioned,
Can you speak in the microphone? Yeah, thank you.
you hear me fine? Okay. So you mentioned that climate change impacts are seen more in the gravity systems. Could you explain why? And
It's because of the pretty much the INI impact of it. It's the infiltration inflow because of the rainfall and the extreme rain events. And the one thing that from a consulting side, what we try to collaboratively educate and work with the utilities is things have changed from a climate change perspective into your sewer systems, is because it was always even today, they was talking about design storms being said, and so much of a design storm, 30% of it enters into your SSO things, but that has changed. So the impact of climate change has become pretty significant, is because because of your extreme events. So, and on the gravity line system of it, considering it's most of it on the sewer systems is your RCP pipes, that's the most ability with your manholes of infiltration and inflow into your system. Most of the utilities that we talk about, and especially under consent decree, if you ask them, they have these pilot INI analysis study. And if you look at one of the major reasons that's causing these gravity systems to fail is not exactly identifying the cause of those INI and thinking that it's the joints and the things, and yes, but it's also the extreme rain events that's causing where, how, and when. So that's why I said it's the timing. I call the fourth dimension on asset management. It is not just on the pipes hydraulics. It's not just on the structural defects. It's the timeline of the events and also the maintenance of it as we go along the future.
thank you.
Great. Another question? Yes, please, Fazal.
Thank you. My question is regarding remaining useful life of both pressure pipes, force main, and gravity pipe. We use generally some sort of 100-year, 120-year, 80-year, something out of convenience. So do you have any perspective on this? I mean, or should we do something what Virginia Tech did, Sunil, for water pipe, that mode of failure and all those type of real analysis, and based on which we would eventually learn what is the right way to determine the remaining useful life. Because gravity pipe, there is a problem also, new pipe versus rehab pipe. Once pipe gets rehab, what is the remaining useful life means?
Personally, I don't care what the remaining useful life is. I don't know. I know that as an asset manager, that may seem like a very odd answer. But what I mean by that is I just want to know which pipe to do first, not necessarily what year do I need to do it. What year do I need to do it is defined by my funding, not necessarily by my remaining useful life number, right? What we do have a calculation for remaining useful life, but the service life that's drawn from is just an assumption. Whether it's 75, whether it's 100, whether it's 150, whether it's 200, the first pipe that comes up with the lowest remaining useful life is going to be the first pipe I need to do, regardless what that number is. It's just the first pipe in the line for replacement based on my funding to actually start replacing pipe. So that's why I'm not too worried about what the actual number is in terms of a service life is, as long as you're consistent with your pipe cohorts. If you say all ductile iron pipe, I'm gonna assign 75 years, then all ductile iron pipe, I'm gonna assume 75 years, and then use my desktop analysis coupled with my condition assessment to say what the pipe is behaving as. So if it's 50 years right now, well, based on its condition and its performance, it's behaving like a 30-year-old pipe. And if I assign it a 75-year life, what's the matter there? 45-year remaining useful life. But that doesn't mean in 45 years, I'm going to replace it. That just means that it's pushed back and deferred. That's my personal opinion on it.
Yep. Any other thoughts on that? I mean, it makes total sense. I mean, because at the end of the day, what do we all have to immediately focus on? The stuff that's not happening 10 or 15 years from now or 20. It's what's happening the next 2 to 3 years. And so it's about prioritization of that work that we need to do. At the same time, as you said, it is important to understand remaining useful life, mainly from the longer term planning and funding perspective, as well as understanding potentially what our strategy is today. And then what's that potential cost going to be versus what another strategy might look like, right? But as far as what you've got to deal with, that's what's happening right now. Okay, so that's still a very valid question though, Fazil, and that is given that we are still setting budgets, we're setting strategies and so forth for longer term, how do we translate defect codes, say, for example, of what we see into something called remaining useful life, just to be able to do that aspect overall of that asset planning?
So I would just wanted to say, yeah, so the remaining useful life is mainly what we're going to use, as he was saying, for projections. So we're going to project out 20, 30 years on when we plan on updating or rehabbing an asset. And that's just important for our planning purposes. So we can let people know, like, hey, this is our plans. This is what type of money we're going to need to address these issues. Doesn't mean we're going to get that type of funding, as funding is always an issue, but we need to know at least to plan ahead and say, and then as we have to cut down, if our budget is less, then we can use our prioritizations to change that. So I think that's important. But what I also think is it's really important, that first number. So that 75, right? We're basing it off of this 75. I think it's really important that we start using our data to determine if that 75 number is even, that 75 year is even a good mark, right? You have this data that you're collecting year after year after year. Are you taking that data and determining, are your pipes actually lasting 75 years? If not, why aren't we not using something else? Why aren't we adjusting that? So I think that's something that we really need to look at as an industry, how we're adjusting those numbers to really fit what works for our systems.
1 second. Yeah, go ahead.
Another thought is that taking a long-term view on things, the idea is to, I think, re-inspect your pipes. If you do 10% a year, every 10 years, every pipe should be re-inspected, and start to build on that history of inspections and look at the history and look at the trends for each pipe over the course of its iterative inspections, and use that to inform your model and your predictability for what is not, maybe not the remaining useful life, but what's the probability that this given pipe will hit a grade 4 or a condition E status in 5 years. And if that probability is low, it's off the list. As you were saying, you push it out and you deal with the ones that are higher priority first.
Okay. Sunil, you had a question?
Yes. Yeah, sure. So Anas, you said that whether you use 75 or 100, where that is coming, is it a design life? Because some utilities, when we were collecting data, they are using design life as that parameter. Design life doesn't mean anything, right? It should be the performance. Just like baby is born healthy, doesn't mean going to live 100 years, right? Yeah. So can you explain on that?
No, you're absolutely right. And kind of what she said is you have to use the data to determine what that actual life is. The design life is just given to you by whoever the manufacturer is saying, if you install it properly, then it should last X amount of years, but it should be refined. So that's kind of what we've been doing, is just refining.
Right, but that's a big assumption there, even if it is installed properly. But you are assuming all other parameters will remain constant for 75 years, right?
And that's why we do the desktop analysis to determine are all those parameters consistent or are there changes in those parameters? The problem with the data is there's no, like, very limited data you can have to actually, check those assumptions and
Right.
check those,
Gage, I have a question.
Yep, go ahead. You,
Kind of piggybacking of where you were. So I think on sewer, even more than on water, right? There's been a progression to understanding how do you evolve beyond condition as your only driver for replacement. For those of you specifically on the utility side and certainly on the private side as well, how have you evolved into more of a performance view of your assets versus just looking, and I think that puts into frame of context this discussion about remaining useful life, right? How are you looking on performance, right? Because at the end of the day, if it's lasting a whole long time, but it's not meeting the level of service that you need, it's obsolete, right? So how have you seen that progression in your asset management implementations?
For us, we implemented a smart sewer program to kind of focus on the performance. We have a level of service. We want to make sure we're conveying the wastewater to the treatment plants appropriately. We have certain ways that we can divert flow so we can maintain that level of service. So when we have certain rain events, we know this is the areas that we're going to see pressures, higher pressures than other areas of the system. So we started putting some automated valves in there to kind of redirect flow in those type of events beyond just the condition. But we even looked at the condition. We said, well, that area is a area of concern from a condition perspective. So also let's put in some automated valves to divert flow, just so it's not the straw that broke the camel's back when the pressures do increase in that area.
Just to add a few things here. I think Chris mentioned one good thing, that 10% of the system being inspected, probably many utilities are doing it, including City of Houston. So I think this is kind of going into asset management 2.0 or 3.0, whatever that is, to gain knowledge about the assets. Probably I would expect Sunil should take into consideration that getting all those data into a common place, whatever you did for water pipe, I think similar things probably should be done on gravity pipe. Because these are important information we are gathering right now, most of the utilities. That's my suggestion.
To your question, I want to add something that City of Houston is doing. We are, whenever as per CD, we are required to certify that, okay, this pipe has capacity before now even we replace that. So rehab and replace both. If we do doing pipe bursts, we still have to say analyze and say this has capacity. So we have developed we have a hydraulic model for up to 10 inch and larger. We're using InfoWorks, and then for smaller pipe, we develop an in-house tool we're calling it HUCAT, but it's a GIS, and we have back-end programming that we develop by calculating all the service units that is going to that particular manhole, then propagating downstream. Kind of, we developed that using SWIM and then GIS and all this SCAD database, parcel database and all that, population and all that. So that has been very useful for us, that we're handling capacity. We're also using the performance data, the SSOs, that is really happening in the field. And when we are doing the sewer basin prioritization, we're taking all that into account. And then those which has high potential of overflow, they get into the inspection first. And that's when all these are working very well right now. And we are reducing a lot of SSOs that way.
excellent. Monet, anything from your perspective?
Well, we're doing basically very similar things. We're taking everything into consideration in order to determine where the asset needs to go next and what priority we're giving to it based off of SSOs, BBKs. We're also using some sensors in our manholes to pay attention to what's going on as far as our flows and in areas where we're having issues there. So that's kind of been our big thing as far as looking at that. We're also doing an all sewer pipes model where we're looking at the capacity and what's going on in all of our pipes as a whole.
Okay. So, we have one more question here, then I've got a question. Go ahead, Freddie.
I guess my question is for the utilities is, can you explain the difference between the approaches for high risk pipes and then medium risk pipes? I know we've been talking a lot about high risk pipes, but how do you manage and extend the life of that asset when it's a medium risk? Just out of curiosity.
For us, just routine maintenance, exercising the valves, venting the air vents. Another thing that we have been doing, regardless of what the criticality of the pipe is, we're doing like PPR and SUE to identify where potentially some unvented high points are to prevent a low risk pipe from becoming a high risk pipe. So those type of programs, just routine maintenance and whatever we learn from our failures, like I mentioned earlier, the unvented high point close to a locality connection. Let's find where all the locality connections are and let's just do some SUE around there, see if there's any unvented high points. Just identifying whatever our causes of failure are. And we don't discriminate and say, we're only going to do these type of desktop analysis on critical pipes. We're going to do it across the entire network and then see if that changes the scores of the low and medium scores to the high, and then start looking at them that way.
Anything else? Okay, so maybe another kind of let's maybe do a shift here. We've been talking about the likelihood of failure side of risk, and we're also talking about risk and prioritization. I guess what I'd like to hear is maybe starting with the utilities and then maybe from the private industry kind of as a follow-up with some other ideas. But from the utilities, can you talk a little bit about what's important or what you're doing with regards to what are those parameters you're using in your consequence of failure, your risk frameworks, and then how do you actually prioritize? Like are you just using risk to prioritize, or to Hugh's point and to Freddie's point when he was asking, what about those medium risks and what are we doing, and is it only risk, and what are the other considerations you're bringing into that process? So again, anybody who wants to start can start.
So for City of Houston, right? So we are using different methods as I presented this morning, that we have this info asset planner type of going through identifying needs, risk based on all these desktop parameters, and also using the actual CCTV data for wherever it is available as a LOF. So we have two types of LOF. One is directly using the scores from those inspection, and one is by using the parameters where we don't have those.
Okay.
So there is another way is as part of the CD, because we are bound by the CD to what to do immediately. We are also doing like we prioritize and then do the inspection on those priority assets, and then when we identify 4 and 5, we have to do something quick, right? So there's like two trains going parallel, and both are important. So one is required by the CD, one is what we want to do for the long-term future.
Gotcha. Okay, so one's going to be more of a strategic alignment to what the city's goals and objectives are versus, what we might look at from a technical perspective, or even, more from an overall consequence, whatever that we might look as important from a service or a loss of service or whatever perspective. We still want to make sure we're taking all the city objectives and goals. That goes to what Celine was talking about earlier, and that's your strategic asset management, making sure that what we're doing tactically is matching up with who we want to be as an organization, as a utility, and so forth. Yeah, great.
All of that.
All of that. So what are you doing? So tell us.
Exactly going to
All of
mention
that.
exactly what you just said. Really, nothing more to add. Great job, Gage.
Okay.
Need a job?
So let's shift gears for a second, and so and just however you want to answer it, but so far most of our conversations today and what this whole workshop's about is data, right? Data, intelligent or advanced asset management. It's really about how do we kind of go, or as we're going down our let's say our digital journey, right? So what I'd like to hear is from each of the utilities where you think you are in your digital maturity, let's say, or your journey going forward. And if you do have a roadmap, and if you do have a roadmap, can you talk a little bit about it if you don't? And then for the private side, what are some considerations that utility owners should be considering when thinking about that digital journey overall? Okay. So again, anybody who wants to start on the utility side, I keep picking on Monet because she's sitting closest to me.
I guess I would say for WSOC Water, I feel like we're somewhere in the middle, right? So we're not just starting off, and I don't always feel as though we're necessarily as advanced as we necessarily would like to be. But I think what we're doing is we have what's called our innovation office. So we're trying to continue to build on innovation and innovative ideas. And so we have a lot of different pilots going on where we're looking at our assets. So one of those is looking at the smart this manhole covers and where they're doing the monitoring. So that's helping us out with our jet PMs and setting out scheduling for cleaning our assets. And how we're going to optimize that. We're looking at systems in order to optimize how we're going out in our different neighborhoods to do our jet cleaning. We're also looking at moving things like just in general, moving things out of the Excel spreadsheets and that kind of stuff to everything being very accessible online and through SharePoints and stuff like that, and through interactions with our different organization and groups through those type of methods. So I feel like we're somewhere in the middle right now.
Okay.
I feel like there's definitely always a lot of room for growth because innovation and technology are changing every day. So because of those changes, we can always continue to find different ways in which we can adapt to that and grow. I guess that's it.
I would say we were one of the initial starters, but now other people are catching up, I could say. But based on we do a lot of presentation at different conferences and get a good feedback. So we think we are moving ahead in a pace because it's like we have it, If you say, is City of Houston wastewater system digital utility today? I would say yes. But to what extent and how sustainable that is a question. But we are working on integration of the data, processes, tools, and IT systems and all that for a while now. And we are making progress every day. So I would say we are there, but is it sustainable? I still question sometimes, like, if few people retire from IT, few people retire from planning, few people retire from operation, will it sustain? That is something we're going to work on, and that's what we're focusing on.
Look, so out of curiosity, and this might be both of you, and then honest, think about it before you answer, is do you actually have a plan? Do you actually have a roadmap that you're executing, you're following as you're going on this journey? I'm just kind of curious. Are you not figuring it out along the way, but look, at the end of the day, we got to do what we got to do. And if we can continue to make our days better and leverage technology as much as possible, we do that, right? But do you actually have a plan? That's what I'm kind of also curious about.
Yeah, we have there's been change in our leadership in the past year. So we're redoing our strategic plan, and that was one of the initial objectives that we are targeting is a digital, what do they call it? I don't know if a digital transformation plan or digital implementation, whatever.
Right.
Some kind of plan that they want, a digital strategy is what they call it. What is our digital strategy? Where do we want to be in those type of things? So we don't have it yet, but that's what we're going to be building once the strategic plan is done, which is, I think, at the end of this month. So we'll see how that turns out. And in terms of answering the previous question, it depends on who you compare us to, right? I mean, are we comparing ourselves to ourselves, or are we comparing ourselves to other? What's the benchmark for maturity? I know there's some models out there for assessing digital maturity. I mean, I think it's unfair for the audience here. You got 3 of the top, agencies in the country in this area. So we're all pretty advanced in various different areas, some better than others in different areas. So, and that's how it is in our organization. Are we talking asset management? Are we talking about process engineering? Are we talking about billing? Are we talking about, in different areas we're more mature than others, but overall each work center has the ambition to be as digital as they can possibly be, to turn data into insights, into, decisions. We are always monitoring, kind of like I mentioned earlier with the technology scan. We're always keeping our eye open. We're attending these conferences, looking what the technology vendors are doing so we can take advantage of them. Like I mentioned earlier, we're always one of the ones on the bleeding edge to use these technologies, but sometimes we're skeptic. So let's let others try it before we try it. So we try as best as we can to be as mature as possible in the digital journey. So I want to say we're basically the same answer as them. We're kind of in the middle, but if we're comparing ourselves to the rest of to the rest of the industry, I would say we're at the top.
Okay.
All three of us is I would have to say, because there's nothing, all these conferences that I've attended, there's nothing that's been presented that I said, we don't do that.
Yep. Excellent.
Okay, again, from a private sector, I think it depends on the utilities, the digital journey is, but I'm going to come up from a different perspective because I'm a digital person, then a water person that I became of. But one thing I do have to understand, I have to say, there's different utilities, as I said, have people to Vinay's point and also Pratishtha's point is people leaving, coming in, leaving in the retention, the transition. So having a digital maturity assessment on any utility is a pretty complicated things because a lot of people are afraid of change. And that's why I said technology is a blessing as much as it's a curse. So when we as a private consultants try to go and help the utilities to become, in fact, using digital is one thing and becoming digital is another thing. So generally overall from a nationwide, after having worked in numerous utilities, there are very few utilities across the nation that I would say maybe in the middle lane of the background of where the digital maturity is at, but there are numerous clients still even understanding what it really means. And in order to get them, unfortunately, we got to change the people mindset. So actually, I always say is technology comes first as people comes first. Actually, it's the people that comes first in these utilities for them to change. And I don't want to miss this and make sure the utilities understand that in order to be digital, you got to compete with tech companies and pay them as much as it's equal in order for them to go into the future, to become the utility of the future as much as they are today to go forward.
All really great comments. We like to work with our customers and help them understand their digital maturity. We use a model. It's a capability maturity model, 1 to 5. Carnegie Mellon is the source of it. We use that approach to help our customers do a self-assessment. But we just don't ask the engineering group or the O&M group. We ask everybody, and we do it all together at one time, so that we have representatives from finance, from customer service, from HR, engineering, operations, IT, et cetera, all providing a perspective on the level of digital maturity across 7 different dimensions. Most of those dimensions, by the way, aren't about hard technology. They're about people. They're about process. They're about the willingness to change and explore new frontiers from a digital enablement point of view. Once we've done that, then we start to talk about the concept of a roadmap, a digital transformation roadmap, multi-year, aspirational, of course, but thought through in a way that aligns nicely with the organization's ultimate strategic goals and objectives. It's a process that we don't recommend you do once, check the box, you're good. Do it again. It's all about technology master planning, not a plan. This is a planning process that it really adds high value over the course of time. At least that's my perspective.
Gotcha.
I guess just a couple of thoughts. They're probably not exactly tied to the question, but I go to a lot of different utilities, and every utility has their own preferences on materials and so on and so forth. And there are a lot of different pipe materials that you can choose from. And I'll just pick 2 of them that aren't currently available. But you got pipes like Orangeburg pipe, AC pipe. Your pipe choices are important. I think if I could encourage utilities to inform themselves about their options, we put together information on remaining useful service life in our force main design guide. Utah State did a big survey on water main break performance with different materials. Virginia Tech has done the review on water main materials. I wholeheartedly agree that a survey with a big enough database for gravity sewer and force mains is very much needed in this industry, just to help utilities make sure they're well aware of what's out there, how things are performing, and then do that tough work that comes with internally challenging your utility to review different materials. I mean, these are your pipe systems. These are the biggest part of your overall assets. And these are important decisions that will ultimately result in utilities that are assets and utilities that become liabilities if regionalization and other things might come around. So.
Okay, these are good. And you know, and Pradeep and Chris, you both said, and I was also kind of waiting before how long is it going to take before we heard people? Okay, and I think what I heard you say, and just for making sure I got this right. So for a utility getting ready to start there, or just wherever they're at, but they want to figure out where they are today, and then get to that, you know, vision and a direction of where they want to go from a digital strategy perspective. I think I heard you say you start with people before you start with technology. Okay, so now I'm going to take that and I'll ask you the three utilities here, and I'd also love to hear from other utilities that are in the room, and that is do you agree with that? Number one, and number two, I'd love to hear like an example that you can talk about that's happened either in your career or at the utility that you're working with people specifically around this idea of that, not just asset management, but that whole now going into the intelligent or the advanced asset management realm. Very similar, building on what we heard this morning. So again, I'd love to hear some examples.
I can give the example of when I first got my role as the asset manager at HRSD. The first thing that the director of operation asked me is, let's get a new CMMS. And I said, what's wrong with the one we have? We already had one though. So that's so it's hard for me to say, well, it's the people before the technology, but we already had the technology. So I said, well, what's wrong with the technology? And he said, well, it's not giving us what we need. I said, well, clearly there's either a people or a process issue because we already got the technology. And if you look at that, you know, the chart of, you know, the best CMMSs out there, it's one of the best, the one that we have. So I'm like, clearly we're not configuring it or doing something. Let's figure out the people, let's figure out the process and see if the technology that we have is giving us what we need. And sure enough, when we did the people and the process, took us a couple of years, we got there. To the most part, was still an ongoing process, but we found out that we just had some configurations to get the technology to fit, you know, the output that we were desiring. So in that case, I would say the people was more before the technology, with a caveat that we already had the technology. Now, if you were to ask me, now we want to adopt a new technology, is it the people or the technology first? If you go to the people first before the technology, they have no idea what they need to see it, they need to touch it, they need to feel it before they can actually embrace it, right? Mm-hmm. So it's hard to say that it's the people before the technology. It has to be kind of a hybrid approach where you're looking at the people, process, technology, and then taking kind of like a design build process where you're just like taking bits at a time and moving progressively along the way to get your desired outcome.
That's an excellent, that's a great analogy. That's excellent.
Yeah, I agree with whatever he said on this. We definitely had experience. Fazal and I have been in this journey for a long time now, and how we struggle even with our IT folks for some time to get there, right? To even make them understand why we need AWS or Azure Data Lake and stuff like that. So this is both people and technology, but what I would say is we need to have some champions that would implement the technology and show other people what we can do, and then have other people on board.
Sure.
I agree with both of them. It's definitely a hybrid approach. You definitely need both the people and the technology, right? And a part of determining whether or not you do need this new or different technology, as he was saying about getting a new CMMS, is do the people already know how to operate it? What's the issues with it? And then also you got to look at the people. Do they know how to properly operate it? And is the technology providing you what you need? Right? Because a lot of times we're saying, let's get a new technology, let's do this, but we're not looking at how our processes are set up in our organization to see how we can make those things better. Right? Sometimes it's a process issue and it's not a technology or a people issue. It's how we have our processes developed. Now, once you determine how your process is developed and you're saying issues or problems with that, then you can start to look at your staffing and these are the things that you need. And then you can say, well, we need this technology to help us be more efficient. And then maybe we don't need, any additional people to help, but sometimes you need a combination of both. You may need more people to get all of the work that's needed and required done, as well as additional technology. So that's why I say it's more of a hybrid look.
Great. I'm going to open it back up to questions, or if anybody else has an example or a thought on people
Yeah.
versus technology first. Yes.
Gage,
Go, hold on.
go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'll just, okay, different type of people. So the difference between like water and wastewater that I found is the developers. Developers have a huge impact on your wastewater system. So I want to know how you manage the developers in your asset management system and if you've had any lesson learned from them.
So I can speak on that because we had something recent. So as far as the developers, I think sometimes there's somewhat of a disconnect, right? We have our, design services, they're reviewing those plans and doing approvals of those. And they're including, the other organizations, so utility services, which is the group I'm in. So they're including that to do a review or something. But sometimes I feel like some things are sometimes missed. So a big thing for us was it was an order issue, right? With one of the new developments, they put a sewer lateral. They attached it into a 21-inch sewer pipe that was down from a pump station, right? And so these new homes that they had all of these odor issues, and so now we're looking to see how we can solve their issue and problem. When to me, this is something that should have been resolved at the development stage, right? We should not have allowed that connection in the first place. We should have required the extension and then because there's also an 8-inch right down there that they could have connected into, but the 21 inches right in front of the property. So that's where they went, and that's what we approved. So we actually are in the process of doing an urgent design for that and doing an extension of the 8-inch to allow them to connect. So we have to take on that burden that we did not require the developers to take on.
Since I'm working for a few months in the development side, handling that team, I have like good experience, recent experience handling all the developments and the capacity and the connection side of it. And I would say it's equally challenging on water and wastewater side because whatever is in the code, our developers would want to just do that. And if it says there should be a 5-foot tapping distance, they don't want, they would put a whole lot of houses just on the small streets of that line because we are meeting the code. So what's the problem with you, right? So then when I looked at one of the problem recently, it says the pipe is 100-year-old and code doesn't talk about the age. So what do you do? Then stuff like that. So there are a lot of challenges on water, wastewater, both sides. And not everything can be taken care of the code because you cannot write like that whole thing in a code for every condition. So as I'm going along with all the developers and finding, okay, now this cannot be resolved without putting that in our infrastructure design manual, I'm asking our operation to do that, update that. So it's helping my experience working with operation and planning side. And now with development is really helping to build that knowledge. Like there was a disconnect between what operation knew versus what was happening in the field. So I'm thankfully in that situation where I could help both sides.
So we're a little different utility. We don't deal directly with the direct connections into our system because we don't own the collection system. So our flow acceptance is just looked at from a capacity perspective. Is our pump station going to be okay if we get this additional development coming in? Yes or no? If so, we just upsize the pumps or whatever, that's on us. So we don't deal with the developers directly. The localities deal with them more so than we do. The only areas that we do is in the small communities where we handle the collection system as well. That one has been an interesting experience because we've been taking over these small communities over the past 10 years, bits and pieces here and there. They come to us instead of us going to them just because they can't maintain their infrastructure. So they come to us to take them over. So when a developer is coming in, a lot of times, we have high standards in terms of how the design is done and how the inspection is done and those type of things. And they don't have consultants, for an example. The contractor putting something on, marking stuff, that's where I'm going to connect. And we're like, no, we need the actual drawing. We need the profile. We need all of that. And they're like, no one ever asked us for that before. We're like, welcome to town. This is the new sheriff, so So it's been a transition for those small communities to have to deal with a larger authority like this that has a little higher standards. So it's been a transition for them, but they have a consultant, a local consultant in some of those communities that has been helping some of those contractors and to get them up to, we actually put them on contract, on an annual contract for us to be able to translate some of those things, our standards, to those developers.
Okay. Fazal, you had a question?
Actually, I was trying to make some comments on this previous topic, which is maturity of this big data. What was the question was? Maturity of the digitalization, right?
Right.
So the way we have started a while ago, so the way we took it, because I manage a team, high-skilled team actually, to do their work by themselves, just like a consulting. So the way we approached, do the task by yourself and identify the needs of analytics, advanced analytics, and process automation. That's how we started. And so every worker, every engineers in my team, they used to do their job as usual by themselves, but through an automated process. So that's how we started. Then we have thought about, okay, now we need an integrated platform so that same data set can be used by everybody. So slowly we build a integrated platform through which now not only planning team works, operations team works as well. So the journey, I call it self-service analytics. Over time, it became now self-serve data management. Because of the technological advancement, we were feeling like this was the need, but nothing was there at that time which can be handled by the end users. But right now, in the last 2 years, Microsoft came up with some technologies that can be managed. Data management can be done by the end users. Now, another new way of managing data, federated through end users and IT. That's what currently we are working on. So people comes first. Without people, nothing can be implemented. But technology is evolving so fast. Just because I thought maybe 5 years ago I will do this way, that is not true. It's not static. It's dynamic and very fast changing. So we need champions in all utilities. That is one thing. We are actually using champions at different places within the organization, because those champions hopefully would help all other members within that group to learn and to eventually contribute to the overall digitalization process. I think from our experience, that is what so far I have learned, because people has to be trained and they have to buy in the whole process. Plus, we have a target actually to make Houston's wastewater utility fully digital by 2025. Fully digital means what? To me, we have to define that. My definition of that is data-driven decision making. Every knowledge workers, as long as, that is my definition. So knowledge workers should make decisions based on data. That's my
okay. And so thinking about that, and that's a good kind of a segue into the next at least question I had on my mind, was thinking about data-driven decision making, and we've talked about artificial intelligence, we've talked about machine learning, we've talked about data acquisition, the data that's coming in and the different forms and so forth. We haven't really touched on things like digital twins. We talked about modeling. But what I'd like to hear, both from the utilities, and private sector, is given kind of what Fazal has said, and just thinking about that digital, journey we're all on. What are, in your minds, those things that we are going to be making being more efficient at? For example, Anas, I appreciate you offered me a job just now. It's the first time I think I've been offered a job on a panel, but we are resource limited, right? So for example, how are we using AI, machine learning, digital twins, whatever it is that we want to put into our digital landscape, okay, for a better decision? What are some examples of how we're gaining efficiencies? Is it just looking at CCTV tapes, or where are we really, advancing right now from that resource perspective and in better confidence, if you will, in our decision making? And I'm looking for some examples that you guys can share with the audience here. So anybody can start. This is throwing out there, it's open.
The only thing I can think of in terms of efficiency is when we're looking at, energy efficiency and chemical consumption, and those type of things. We are using, I don't know, I don't want to call it digital twin, but we're kind of starting the foundational elements towards a digital twin. I hesitate to use the term digital twin.
I do too, because every time I say it, I know everybody cringes because they think you don't even know what a digital twin is, Gage.
Yeah, well, not just that, because if there's a digital twin, there's only one, right, for the entire system for our organization. But all of a sudden, it's like, oh well, we have one for process engineering, we have one for asset management, that's not a twin then. We have a tribe.
That's right.
So I hesitate.
That's right.
And then
triplets.
They also say, well, it's for condition data, it's for process data, it's a behavior data. You see a lot of it's a new buzzword. It's the new thing. So there's so many different definitions out there, and it's hard to agree on what the definition is. So I hesitate to use the term, but what I like to use is we're using the foundational elements towards having a digital twin. So we're finding efficiencies in every one of our areas. So each person is staying in their lane and saying, how can I be most efficient in my day-to-day operation? And then how can I help the person next to me be efficient also? If each of us do that, then we will progress, because the industry out there is progressing in terms of technology, that we can take advantage of these technologies and be efficient in our area and help the others around us.
So if I could build on your digital twin comments, in my simplistic mind, it's simply a dynamic simulation model. And I think it's okay to have multiple dynamic simulation models for different processes. So you could have a digital twin for your treatment plant. You have a digital twin for your collection system, another one for your distribution system. You could have a family of digital twins, because you have a family of multiple processes. They're all interrelated, no doubt, but they are separate, fairly discrete processes that you can put a fence around, digitally speaking. I think the digital twin concept has a lot of potential going forward at various scales. But to your question, Gage, about how are we helping people be more efficient and effective? I want to make a comment on people tools, collaboration tools. I think we were all forced, starting in about March of 2020, to make some big changes in the way we work together, virtually, remotely, using Teams and Zoom, and using background tools like Slack or even SharePoint to collaborate when we're not even physically connected. I think that has moved us forward in ways that were unanticipated. If there's anything good that came out of that pandemic, I think that was maybe one of the best things that came out of it, looking for a silver lining. Anyway, those are my comments.
Okay.
Yeah, and I want to say about digital twin, because people when say we have a digital twin, everybody has different kinds of digital twin, and nobody has like a whole digital twin that everybody aim to. But in our system, we have developed a advanced analytics platform that we're calling it AIAP platform, which actually can connect to all of the digital twins we have, different kinds of digital twins, different tools, different apps, so that from one spot, we can access all of that for visualization, for data analytics, for whatever needs we have, right? So that way, everybody goes there. Our team basically, like even operation, we have given it to operation managers and all that, so that they can go there every morning and do whatever they need to do from there. So we have connected our SCADA data to look at our Power BI apps for our SCADA, Power BI, multiple Power BI apps we have, and we have finalized on some of them which are needed for daily use, and we have made it available through that. And there are a lot of AGOL apps that we have internally that is meant, some are enterprise level, some are team level and all that. So that kind of platform that we have developed is helping us, our team plus our operation team, to do a lot more efficient work than before.
Okay, excellent.
So with us, we're not currently doing any digital twin stuff. I know for the BIM modeling, they're looking at that on the vertical side, but we are in the process of updating our CMMS. And so a part of that is for us to expand and get more involved into that digital framework and that collaboration of all our different areas that we have information in, bringing those all together in a more collaborative environment. So once we transform into that, we'll be able to expand into more collaborative digital spaces with our data.
Hey, Gage, just one thing here.
Yes,
So-
it's you. There you are.
So having recently left WSSC, I want to just give that team a little bit of credit on what sometimes when you look on technology, right? On the efficiency standpoint, I think we try to look too big of a horizon. We're always trying to slay the dragon, right? When it comes on to the technology implementation. That's one of the things where I feel like in the digital twin conversation, we miss an entire gap of efficiency that could be gained with smaller implementations of technology. One example that I would talk about is that many years ago, we were probably doing some of the most intensive CCTV programs in the country at the time under a consent decree. Part of that was the fact that we had, a big reviewer team was going in and watching hours of boring video, right? To just verify the coding on a pipe, right? So, at the time, really trying to look, there has to be a better way to do this, right? And this was really before all this AI conversation started to really jump off in water. But what we had worked with is that we worked with a partner to really just look on the fact that we need to develop a system that can pre-clear, scan, and really manage the laborious process of going through verifying if a video is actually coded, looking on, what are the defects, where it is in the pipe, and actually allow you, instead of watching the 2-hour video to go, 750 feet, that you could look to see where the defects are and jump to that part if there's a verified process. And in terms of return on efficiency, you move from having a very big reviewer staff to a much smaller staff, which can now really focus on being more efficient, right? And then also allow that system to be directly tied into the design process, because now they're actually there's a collaborative process in the recommendation and the inspection versus what was happening before of, well, we did this review, here's this paper that says that, maybe you need to go line this. They go and pay somebody else to go review it again to make sure that, oh yeah, the lining is exactly what you needed to do. So I think my takeaway from having been in this thing for a while and doing it is the fact of we tend at these venues to really talk about this broad, big horizon, right? Water is going to be the next Silicon Valley kind of a thing. But inherently, utilities are very conservative organizations, and there's really multiple layers that we can gain that budgetary efficiency, which is really where the noose is around the neck, right? To really improve that, those layers going up. I think many times what happens is that it's seen as a bridge too far for leadership, and we miss the opportunity to then get the wins that are, plausible, achievable and reliable. And I think that's really where we should start to have a better focus on how can we use technology to augment versus technology to revolutionize.
Right.
I think that term augment maybe is better than efficiency, because I wanted to challenge you before you said that word augment, because when people think efficiency, we think more with less. Right?
Mm-hmm.
We definitely doing more, but I guarantee you we're not doing it with less, because since I've been in the organization, we've only been growing in personnel in every department, especially the IT department.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's the case, I mean, are we getting rid of a maintenance technician and bringing in a IT specialist to manage all this data? So I don't know if we're doing it with less. We're definitely doing more. So I don't know if we're being efficient, but we are augmenting our staff with technology. So we are doing more, but I don't know if we're quite at the efficiency point yet.
Right, but in that augmentation, but in that overall augmentation, and to Hugh's point, and one thing you did say also, Hugh, is that instead of trying to eat the whole elephant, it's better take those bite-sized chunks as you're going along, right? even though we all want to eat the elephant, right? Because that's it. That's the big vision. But what does that typically do? It bogs us down. We to your point earlier about asset management programs that you lose that credibility because you're trying to eat the whole elephant at that time. So it sounds like I like both of those, both the augmentation aspect, okay, but also let's just do it in what we can absorb as an organization, right? And be able to not just get the quick wins, but to realize the efficiencies, or at least whatever our definition of efficiency is, right? And how we're making the better decisions overall. Great topic. Any other comments before we might move on to another topic or anything? Okay. First, I'm going to ask again, is there any other questions that the audience has? They'd like to, I think, what do we have for time? We got about another 10 minutes.
Yes, I would add two things.
Yes.
It adds actually both efficiency, reliability, and buy-in. Because when you have all the decisions are made based on one set of information, it adds lots of value, directly or indirectly. And eventually, once everybody is comfortable with that, it adds tremendous values. Decisions are made kind of on the fly, some of the decisions. So no question asked because same data everybody is using, right? That actually, it brings a lot of additional values. Maybe we don't understand or understand directly, indirectly, it does.
Gotcha.
I just wanted to say, like, once you get better at like collecting your data and having more, having expansive amounts of data and information for your system, it leads you to want to do more. So that's when you start to look at technology and try to continue to adopt it more, right? So for us, as he was saying, we were doing a lot of CCTV. We have all that data. A part of that CCTV, from that CCTV data, we're getting recommendations for jetting our pipes, right? They need to be clean. That number is going up and up and up. So how can we optimize that part of our infrastructure? How can we handle our in-house crews? Because that's a limited resource that we have, right? How can we optimize things for them to make sure that they're focused in their specific areas? But also, how can we look at our system and determine, are these schedules that we're currently using on our jet PMs, for example, are those meeting our standards? Are they even exact and correct? So you have somebody reviewing a CCTV and they're saying, based off of that, we think this should be an annual, but maybe you have some SSOs in the process. So you're like, this annual is not working. So then you're increasing it to maybe a 6 month or a 3 month, right? How long does that pipe need to stay on that 3 month? That's when you start thinking about those type of things that you're seeing in your data. And you then say, well, what technology is out there that can help facilitate us making better decisions with what we're doing, with what we already have? So that's kind of where I see data and technology taking us, taking our data that we already have and kind of looking at some of our processes and seeing how we can do those better and more efficiently with our limited resources.
Go ahead.
Hi. So first of all, thank you for this excellent panel. I actually want to go back to the question of the digital transformation or digital strategy plan. So part of that core, and I think we can all agree, is data. And so piggybacking off of Fazil here in City of Houston, kind of just ask level of comfort or level of difficulty, I should say, in terms of data sharing, both on the utility level, so with your own colleagues, within across different departments, and also externally with engineering firms, with startups, with vendors. Just curious about kind of that level of comfort and level of difficulty, and maybe even an example of how you actually went and circumvented that and kind of deployed a technology as a result.
Initially, it was hard. So initially, during the data exploration, trying to understand data, what data we have, what kind of system we have, it took some time. And when we learned, okay, there is data gap, this data doesn't look right, how to fix it, all that kind of thing happened. And then we got comfortable. Whatever we have, we can fill in this data gap using this method, right? So everybody agreed on that, and we fill in a lot of data. Let's say we don't have as-built on a lot of pipes, right? Because those were old pipes, given by some mods, they were annexed, and city didn't have any drawing. So what to do with that? So during this time of that subdivision development, this was the pipe type, and we would fill in, and during field inspection, when they get inspected, will be enhanced. So there were a lot of those data part which we dealt with. And then sharing part. Once we have all the data, that was, I mean, not all, like being comfortable with that data, and then we develop all these different applications, and then even like in planning, we have developed a lot of application. And while we were first, we used within our own group, and then when we showed it to operation, so we were in different meetings. And I remember a few years ago, like a couple of years ago, so we will open up that, and then we will do some decision making based on that. They'll say, why don't you share that app? We said, of course we'll share. It will take some more time because we were not really comfortable for some time to share, because we don't know, can we maintain that, right? Because the number of staff that we have is limited. So we have so many different responsibilities, and are we going to be able to maintain? So now we have become comfortable. We have given it to our operators. Now we have involved IT. Now it's being more automated, and we have a lot of different people agree on processes, and we have put a lot of I mean, we have done a lot of progress on that. And it's a journey, I would say. And we got pretty comfortable, at least sharing it within inside. And now we have staff augmentation from the contractor side, and we are giving access to them when they work with city. We give them, just like city people, they have access. They work from home. They have access to those. Sometimes I mean, generally they sit with us, but even they work from home, they would get exact access just like the city staff do.
For me, if it depends on how I define the comfort of sharing data, because there's a comfort in terms of able to, there's no security issues to share it. And there's the confidence level of, am I sharing the right data? Is the data going to give them actually something? Is it quality data? I have a problem more so on that side than I am with the security side. Don't tell my CISO I said that. But generally speaking, as a wastewater agency, we don't have that concern as much as water, utilities do with the Bioterrorism Act and some of those other restrictions that they have more so than we do. But on the confidence side, that's kind of where I hesitate. Like I'm not so comfortable when someone says, "Can you give us all this data about this?" And I'm like, to Sunil's presentation earlier, 60%, what was it, 60% of the time cleaning the data before you're able to even share it. So I'm like, oh my gosh, like they're asking for this. Is it quality? I don't want to share something right now. I'm not comfortable sharing it if it's not at the quality that, for me, I'm comfortable with sharing. So it actually is insightful for them. So that's where I lose my comfort level a little bit. But in terms of sharing data with our external partners, I mean, we have a lot of collaboration tools. Even the new Esri, there's this, I forgot what it's called, Esri collaboration or something like that. We set up with several of our consultants, and it's just going back and forth, data flowing back and forth with no issues whatsoever.
So from WSSC Water, we definitely have some security concerns, obviously, in certain ways. But if that person's a consultant with us, then of course they have access to the data as long as it involves data that would specifically pertain to their task. As far as sharing data internally, we are making big efforts, and we are sharing a lot of data internally. We have what's called our data community. So we're meeting monthly and sharing data amongst the groups so everybody understands the different, because there's so many different sections, right? So many different departments. And so that other departments understand what everybody has access to and what's available for everybody to use. Because I think a lot of times you're so focused on what you're working on. So you're in engineering, you're focused on these are the technologies we use. These are the different apps that we're using. And then you're in utility services, and these are what we use. But sometimes a lot of those things can overlap and can be useful for both groups and different departments to all use. And so we're trying to make sure that we're decreasing those gaps in as far as our technology. And our IT department is taking a big lead and being involved with that as well, making sure that when we are applying or want to get additional technologies, that we're looking across our entire company to see what we already have and what can fit the needs of somebody versus us just always going out and getting an additional technology. And so we've also done a process where it's showing how you can use the different technologies depending on a different type of asset. So for example, you may look at your wastewater assets. How is technology involved from the inception of that wastewater asset to when that asset leaves our system, decommissioned? So having meetings and sharing that with everybody, no matter whether you're working in accounting or you're working, outside of that, maybe you're in revenue or something like that, that you can see how we're using this technology throughout the organization and how data is important and what effect that could have based off of you and what you do for your job. Because I think a lot of times people see what they do and only what they do, and they don't realize how one little thing that they do has a big effect on everybody else. And we have had meetings also with like field staff about certain things like, are you closing your work orders properly? Are you attaching them to because our system requires you to attach it to an asset. Are you attaching it to that asset properly? Those are the things that we need to be done correctly because that's allowing us to do our research and have that data on SSOs and leaks, breaks and leaks. How are we able to use that data if we're not capturing it properly? So we're really big on making sure that everybody understands the different processes and how they can affect other people within that process.
Excellent. So I have one final, Chris has got a comment, and then we have, looks like we have a follow-up. So I guess
Surely, this is a really good
this is
question.
good. It's not, just keep going.
It's a great question. There is so much data being created today. Let me ask you a question. There's a statistic that says 90% of the world's digital data has been created in the last X number of time period. Any idea? 90% of the world's data has been, how much?
3 months.
18 months. 18 months, if you know. So 18 months, we've created 90% of the world's digital data. Oh my gosh, and this trend is not decreasing. So we're creating data all over the place. This talks about issues that Anas was referring to with quality. And the quality issue is tied to, I think, architecture and data management. And usability at the end, exactly. How do you find what you need? And once you've found it, is it of quality and is it reliable? Can you use it? There's an organization, it's called the Water Wastewater CIO Forum. Is an organization I was associated with when I was at Denver Water. And we had a survey a couple of years ago. And the question was, how much of your enterprise data is used for value? And the collective average number with a very tight standard deviation was 10%. That suggests we've got some data management challenges across the industry.
Yep.
So I guess, how do you deal with, engineers love to squirrel away all their stuff. So how do you deal with the hundreds of Excel files that are on Joe's computer and Bob's computer and aren't shared on the network and aren't in a database? And then how do you deal with when you're trying to mine data out of that stuff when you finally find it all, that they used formatting as data and things like that. So how do you mine all of that data out of all of that crap?
You've been looking over my shoulder.
Yes.
Yeah, first question is, do you need that? But you've got it, so the question is almost moot. It's almost moot. You've got it, right?
The data I'm thinking of in particular, yes, I need that. And it's on Bob and somebody else's computer.
Right. So in a couple of brief words, enterprise content management. Enterprise content management is key, and it has to be done by changing behavior. It's a people challenge. I'm sorry? Oh, you've got to use some data discovery tools, automated data discovery tools, and you start changing the behavior of people so that they're presented with a discovery of their data, the data that's trivial to them, and their guidance has to be, you need to put it in a better place. You need to organize it in a better way. You need to add usable or meaningful metadata on all these spreadsheets. Otherwise, they're of no use. We might as well delete them. Of course, your CIO probably isn't going to suggest that, but nonetheless, enterprise content management and people practices and influence is the key, I think.
Okay.
I want to add a little bit on that one.
Go ahead.
The Excel part of it, right? So it's very interesting. Everybody has very, Excel is the king of all the tools, and everybody has a lot of Excel, right? And everybody loves Excel, and it is from primitive Excel to all kinds of hi-fi Excel with all programming and stuff, right? So what we found is everybody has it, and then when we started discussing, right, different teams. So Fazal and I have been like in this journey for a long time with our operation team. So we didn't know who has what at that time. So we started talking to people, group by group. People talk about this technology and stuff, and then they say, okay, what you do, what you have, and all. Then they become a little bit open. After a few meetings, not like first meeting they'll say everything. Then they say, okay, we have this person who does this kind of great job, and it's okay. Let's start with that. So that's how we became familiar with some of the champions in different teams, and then we figured out, okay, this is a system that is useful. And then for constant degree, we have a different approach that we took. There are a lot of Excel, very useful Excel that is needed for constant degree management, and we are also utilizing those. Apart from all of our different kinds of enterprise system-wise databases, we have also spreadsheets that are very, very needed and useful. And we identify key people who will maintain those spreadsheets, and they will put in the SharePoint that we have given them, where they'll put in the exact format. We told them, once you are settled on the format, there will be no change, because we're going to report based on that. So that has been maintained by people and that team, multiple teams.
All right, I
So,
think
ho-
with
ho-
that.
okay, sorry.
Go
So
ahead.
we
Go ahead.
do have-
Go ahead. Keep
because
going.
We had our the ransomware incident at the city, and when the ransomware incident at the city happened, all of the enterprise data was held hostage, but the data that was on Bob's computer was still there. And so
That's why it's a
for me
blessing
to
and a
convince-
curse.
We're gonna
for
tell
me to
Bob.
convince Bob to take that data off of his computer is
No, we're gonna tell Bob, Brian. We're gonna tell Bob.
Okay, do we have one more or no? Oh, one more.
Not much of a question. I think I just want to follow with what Anis is talking about. As most of you know, that I was with the Kansas City Water leadership till 2 months ago. On the digital question, digital maturity, I think that is we're on a track that some arbitrary standard we're trying to set or what the digital maturity stages are. I told my organization and also our peers is that really you're only your own standard, and to compare with your own game and see where you are today and look at your institutional constraints and opportunities, see how high you want to jump in what time, and then compare to your own reference. When you're trying to compare with some arbitrary reference set by maybe some group of people, it's never gonna make it. That's it's not a great start for the utilities. That's just general comment. So we have set up our own standard, sort of a reference point. Where we are in 2021, that's our reference point. And then where I'm going to be in 2024 is my next leap. Second part was that Greg, you talk about anybody have any digital strategy plan or by design? You don't find them. It's pretty hard pressed. So about 2.5 years ago, I started that championing internally from a leadership perspective, next stage of digital transformation. And we looked at, and there's nothing really, say, a project by any utility worldwide. This is our digital strategy project. Just like asset management is a concept, it's not a project, right? So we have thought about our digital transformation going on forever. It's not like we started now. Somebody said 2017, I don't buy it. It's a transformation is happening as long as they've been working in the industry for 37 years. So it is that next stage of digital transformation is what we're talking about. From that point of view, we looked at what would be our journey like next 10 years. So we thought we want to have a current digital strategy developed. So when we hired an engineering team out of competition and everything, and what we told them is, I'm going to give you 3 years. First year, I'm going to give time, I'm going to pay you $1 million, almost $1 million a year, to just learn our organization and help us to learn ourselves through that process. Then go into the next stage, what would be the short-term strategy, long-term strategy like? Reason is that people always really first. We talk about individual technology, I can see that. But overall transformation, people has to be there first. It took me 2 years with multiple departments, about almost 24 meetings to decide what would be our next 10 years like. And got buy-in from operators, engineers, and then finance, IT, all those folks. Then we said, this is how our project is going to be. Then we collectively developed an RFP, put on the street to get a consulting team to support us with this process. So first year is going to be people, change management. Then we start talking about what would we go next. So if anybody interested, check with the Kansas City Water, Brian Hess is the Smart Sewer Division Head. He'll be happy to share the RFPs we prepared and scope we prepared for the engineering team. And that's the journey they are on right now. Just anybody interested. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, that's very good. Thank you very much. And I'd say with that, let's give it up for the wastewater pipeline, okay, panel here. Again, I knew they were going to rock it. And so I say thank you for everybody and everybody's participation. And Sunil, you said that it's a coffee break?
Yes, it's a coffee break. We will meet at 3:30. So it's like 25 minutes, right?
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
20 minutes coffee break.
Thank you. Awesome. No, I don't know what it does. I think it's.
It was great. All time vendor. It was very good. Yeah.